The following recording was made in the late 1970s by Knox Hurst, grandson of John S Knox Jr. And this is an oral history of our family.
This is Knox Hurst, and I am interviewing John S. Knox on the 1930s. Mr. Knox, would you please give us a brief description of how you grew up in the Atlanta area and a brief description of you?
Okay. First thing, Knox, you should call me Jay, and then I'll go from there. I was born in Atlanta in 1924. I was born at Emory University Hospital, and I went to E. Rivers Kindergarten, finishing E. Rivers Kindergarten in 1930. And then I went to E. Rivers School all the way through E. Rivers through the 7th grade, and then to North Fulton High School. I graduated from North Fulton High School in 1942. In 1942, I enlisted in the Navy and went into World War II and became a naval aviator. But your particular interest is growing up in the 30s in Atlanta. As you know, the 30s were right in the middle of the Depression, and we lived on Peachtree Road, a little bit south of E. Rivers, very close to where Harrison's is now, which is right by the Seaboard Railroad. And many people were riding the rails at that time. The whole families, as a matter of fact. And the rail cars would stop at what was called Deerland. That was the rail stop for the Seaboard Railroad. It was a passenger stop, just like Brookwood Station was for the Southern Railroad. The Seaboard Railroad, where it went under Peachtree, was called Deerland. So the Seaboard passenger trains would stop there, and also the freight trains would stop there. But on the freights, there were so many people out of work, and so many farmers were losing their farms that there were whole families riding the rails, and they would stop there and come up and lay down in our backyard, and my grandmother would feed them sandwiches right there in the backyard, and they would get on the rails again and ride some more.
Mr. Knox, could you tell me a little bit about political events in the 1930s and politics?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Calvin Coolidge was president, and I remember very vividly the Democratic convention of 1932, I think it was, when Roosevelt was nominated, and he was the first president to fly in an airplane. And I remember listening to the radio when he flew from, I guess it was Albany, New York, to the convention in Chicago, and accepted the nomination over the radio. And he, of course, ran against Hoover with the New Deal. And,
could you tell me a little bit about the New Deal?
Well, in order to know what the New Deal is, you've got to remember that at that time there were something like 11 million people unemployed in the United States. And as a matter of fact, we were very close to a sort of a revolution, or going either all the way to the left or all the way to the right. There were many people, particularly blue-collar working classes, that wanted a revolution and felt that the way Germany was going is the way we should go. And I remember very well talking to many of the streetcar drivers that I got to know that went up and down Peachtree that thought that we ought to have a dictator in the United States. And so the New Deal was really an effort to head off this absolute revolution that was coming. And what it was really a redistribution of the wealth, where Roosevelt had his brain trust, I think he called it. He had Harry Hopkins and a whole bunch of other people in there that told him what should be done to turn the economy around. And it sounds very familiar when we talk about Reagan now, but that was the whole idea. And he instituted many programs. Probably the biggest one was the Works Progress Administration, called the WPA, where they employed people that were unemployed to do public works. They built roads and did many things. They took people in, teachers and artists and other people, and brought them in and paid them out of the government till, out of tax money, by increasing taxes for corporations. And they paid people to build post offices. The artists decorated the post offices. And as a matter of fact, some of the greatest artworks that we have in the United States now are in post offices that were built during the 1930s, and that the artists were paid through the Works Progress Administration, called the WPA. There was another thing called the CCC. That came along a little bit later. That was the Civilian Conservation Corps. There were many young people unemployed, roaming the whole country with really more or less starving to death. And Roosevelt put in this thing called the CCC, and they went in to correct a terrible situation that had developed during the 30s, which was the Dust Bowl. There was a drought in the whole United States. In the western part of the United States, was just turning into dust. Matter of fact, dust even settled on Atlanta. They're coming all the way from Oklahoma. And the Civilian Conservation Corps were just young people who were out of work, who went into Appalachia and to other places. In fact, this Unicoi Park in North Georgia was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Were there any other government agencies?
There were a whole lot, and they all had alphabetical designations. One of them, which was very important at that time, was called the NRA. It was called the National Recovery Act. And the idea was there to spread the work around. And Roosevelt, the National Recovery Administration under Roosevelt, went around to all the businesses in the United States and made them sign NRA pledges that said that they would never work anybody over 40 hours per week. Most people were working much more than 40 hours a week, 48 or more. And the idea of that was to give work to people unemployed by holding the employed people down to 40 hours a week. And everybody was considered unpatriotic if they didn't have an NRA sticker on their stationery for their business, or on the front of their business, or a sign in front of their business. And this was brought into the courts as being illegal by some chicken farmers. They may have come from Georgia. So it was eventually came to the Supreme Court of the United States. It was called the Sick Chicken decision. And the Supreme Court of the United States decided that the National Recovery Act that required businesses to hold their employees' work hours to 8 hours a week was unconstitutional, and it was thrown out.
Could you tell me a little bit about what kind of entertainment you enjoy and what kind of entertainment was around growing up in the 30s?
Well, entertainment in the 30s was a lot different than it is now. Newspapers were much more important to people's lives than they are now. Even though we had radio, it was not as good as the radio now. And people depended on newspapers. And when anything happened out of the ordinary, they would put out what they call an extra. They don't have extras now, I don't think. But they would put out extras, and there would be squads of unemployed people from 5 Points that would take the extras and run out Peachtree and run out Auburn Avenue and run out Stewart Avenue and what have you to sell these extras. And they would keep selling them, and the news would travel as fast as they could go. Either they would have these trucks, and they would go out and they would sell the papers as they went along. As far as entertainment is concerned, we had radio, which was just getting started pretty good. In 1932, we had radio, and I remember listening to, when I would come home from E River School in the evening, I would listen to Little Orphan Annie come on every night at 5:30, and The Secret Three would come on at 4:45. The Secret Three was the Quaker Oats, 3-Minute Oats, and I wrote in and got a Secret Three badge. And I remember that, and then Little Orphan Annie would come on, and I got a Little Orphan Annie Dakota pin, and Little Orphan Annie was advertised in Ovaltine, and after Little Orphan Annie came on, Fat Swallow would come on at 5:45 for 15 minutes, and then the WSB News would come on at 6 o'clock. Other kind of entertainment, I guess. Well, we had a pony, and we'd ride it up and down Peachtree Road, and we had streetcar tracks right down the middle of Peachtree Road, and grass would grow up in the middle of Peachtree Road. And one time I remember the pony getting loose, and we were at E River School, and the pony was out in the middle of Peachtree Road eating the grass around in the middle of Peachtree, and they called us, and me and my friend and I had to leave the third grade to go get the pony and bring him out of Peachtree Road and take him on back to where he lived. And another thing, we used to hunt quail too. I was a little bit older then. I guess I was in about the 7th grade. And the covey of quail would fly across Peachtree Road. We'd shoot it on one side, and it'd fly across the other side, and we'd shoot it on the other. This was about where the Colorado, what's the name of that place? No, it's the Colorado Mining Company is, right about in there, a little bit south of Harrison, about halfway between Harrison's and E River School. Mm-hmm. And we would shoot quail on each side of Peachtree.
Could you tell me a little bit more about entertainment?
Well, as far as entertainment is concerned, of course we didn't have TV, but I want you to know that all the little kids at E Rivers and all through North Fulton and whatever, we always talked about, wait till TV gets here. We always speculated, when TV gets here, there'll be marvelous things happen. We'll be able to see this, see that, and whatever. So everybody always said, wait till TV gets here. Now, the movies, that was a big deal with us on Saturday. We always went to the Buckhead Theater on Saturday. All the kids went there. That was the only theater on the north side. And we would cost us 10 cents to get in. And I remember seeing the main players were Buck Jones and Tom Mix. Tom Mix was the absolute star of Hollywood at that time. And then later it was Buck Jones, and then much later Hopalong Cassidy and all that. And we used to see serials every Saturday, and they were really good. One that stands out in my mind is Burn 'Em Up Barnes. He was a race car driver, and they had two drivers in the car. One of them was pumping oil, and the other was driving the car. Burn 'Em Up Barnes. Though what I was telling you about then was pretty much in the early 30s. Later on, they were much more sophisticated movies that they had downtown. And that was a big deal to go downtown. We'd go down to Fox. Fox opened in the late 20s, I believe. And we used to go there to see the main movies, or go to the Paramount, the Lowe's Grand, or the Rialto. Those were the only movies they were in Atlanta. And